Hello and welcome to Absolutely Not. My name is Katrina Schroll. My pronouns are they, she, he, and I am so grateful that you are here with us today. Real quick, if you appreciate the work that I do here or elsewhere, please visit the Support the Mission page of my website. There are several options to choose from to support my work, so please just choose one. The key words for this episode are ableism, exclusion, and performative. I encourage y'all to look up the definitions of these words and compare them to the definitions you carry with you on a daily basis. If you need help comparing, please let me know. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp allows you to connect with one of 24,000 licensed therapists in a safe and private online environment. You pay just a low flat fee for unlimited therapy with your therapist. Visit www.betterhelp.com/absolutely-not for more information and to get 10% off your first month. This link can be found in the show notes. Today's episode is titled Leave No One Behind. I'm excited to talk about this with our amazing special guest, Kelly Bron Johnson, they. They are an autistic and hard of hearing self-advocate, keynote speaker, author, and founder of Completely Inclusive and the Autistic Entrepreneurs Network. As a mixed heritage Black non-binary person, Kelly brings her intersectional identity into all her work and aims to break down the stigmas and systemic barriers that exist in society to make the path easier for others. They live in Montreal, Canada. They identify as Barbadian and French Canadian, disabled, hard of hearing, and autistic, dysthymic, queer, ethical, non-monogamous, non-binary femme, and a second-generation immigrant. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you being here, and I would love for you to share with the audience why this episode is titled Leave No One Behind.
So thank you for having me in the first place. It's fantastic. I'm very excited. Waited for this day. Well, I think when we were having a discussion about not leaving anyone behind, I think it's partly because I had spoken about feeling left out and feeling left behind in my own life. But I think this concept informs all the work that I do. I love the Audre Lorde quote that says, "I am not free until any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are very different from my own," right? So I approach everything with this intersectionality, that we don't leave anyone. Who was it? It was Reverend Jesse Jackson had said too, I'm not going to look down on a man unless I'm willing to help him up. And that's kind of how I go along. That's how I live my life. So it's always making sure, okay, well, we have to think. If we look around us and we're in a room, okay, who's left out? Who hasn't had a chance to speak? Who's not here that needs to be here? And make sure we're not leaving anyone behind.
And some people do not give a damn about that. They do not care if people are being left behind. Have you ever been in rooms where there were people who did not give a damn about that?
I think there's been a lot of situations, sad to say. I could think of times when I felt like a token, that I was there as, and so you kind of plopped into this environment without any support or any backup. And that's a very difficult place to be in. And sometimes if you speak up, nobody has your back and nobody is interested, and it's, you're saying things that they didn't want to hear. And so it's a difficult position to be in, right?
You are saying things that they didn't want to hear. Once upon a time, I used to believe that there was something wrong with me when people didn't want to hear the things I was advocating for or speaking about. Has there ever been a time in your life when you felt like that?
I think it's just that it's their journey, right? It's not so much about me. It's really about where they're at and their path. Some people have not started the path at all. They have not even taken a step and other people are on their journey and stumbling along, which, you know, I have a bit more respect for. But yeah, I mean, I think there's so many cases where it's not for me to take it personally. I'm trying to think if I have taken it personally. I think I've probably wondered, like, okay, where is this coming from and what is this about? And luckily, I think I've managed to surround myself with a lot of interesting people, right, from all walks of life. And I think that has helped me realize I'm not alone in this, right? I'm not the only one who's felt this way.
And for anyone who is listening, who is like, I feel so alone right now, it's so very important that you surround yourself with people who are interesting, and know exactly about the experiences you've been through. Was there ever a time that you weren't surrounded by interesting people?
I think I feel very lucky in the sense of, I went to an elementary school that prided itself on multiculturalism. And at the time, this is in Montreal, at the time, school boards were divided between the Protestant school board and the Catholic school board. And since I was technically Anglican, I was christened, we weren't practicing, I was at the Protestant school board. Now, the difference was that the Catholic school boards only accepted Catholics, whereas the Protestant school board took everyone. So we had Sikhs, we had Jewish people, not so many Jewish, but we had Sikhs, we had Muslims, we had Buddhists, we had Protestant, of course, we had atheists, we had everybody. And so it was this wonderful, the so-called melting pot of people. And it was one of the first of its kind in my area. And it was going against the grain. It was a school that was created in the 60s. And that was completely like this concept of having a complete mix of children of all races all together, and embracing that. It was something that was totally radical, So I kind of feel very lucky that I was in that environment. And in addition to that, we also included people with disabilities. So it was kind of like a reverse inclusion school. We had satellite schools that were specialized schools, but then those students could come in and mix with us, right? So we were all together. And from my very earliest memories from kindergarten, I was basically taught how to help my friend who was a wheelchair user. I learned the etiquette. I learned how to push a wheelchair properly. I learned how to help him with his leg braces, which were, when I look back, I feel so bad for those leg braces. They were just an awful contraption that was rooted in ableism, this idea that maybe he would get up and walk one day. That's a whole other story. We're still friends now, so I hope he doesn't mind. Hey, David. So I feel like I was put in an environment, and I think also just being mixed heritage myself, that I was always in an environment of diverse, I hate to use the word diverse, people of the global majority altogether.
I love that you've mentioned so many groups that you were able to be in relationship with and be in community with. There are a lot of people who have not even heard of any of those groups that you just talked about, or have been around, or are not surrounded by different types of interesting people. And because of that, they see the world through one lens. Have you ever been in contact with people who were unable to understand the way that you view the world?
For sure, when I travel, when I leave Montreal, it's a wake-up call. It's sometimes it's scary. I'm not going to lie. And even you don't have to go very far sometimes outside of a metropolis in order to be surrounded by whiteness. They haven't left the country, they haven't left their town, they've never seen somebody with a little bit of color, and the completely different reactions. My mother is Quebecoise, so her family was from the Lower St. Lawrence, so we would drive up there, but it's all white and French, and I could count on one hand. Sometimes it was a joke. My sister and I would count and see if we could see any other Black people. And most of the time we didn't. I think now it's gotten a little bit better, but, you know, other than going to see my family, there was, you know, I certainly did not feel like I was supposed to be there. I wasn't made to feel unwelcome, and I think I was very young, so that kind of helped. I might have missed some of those kind of things, but I knew that that's not where I belonged, if that makes sense.
My heart. I like that you keep using these very specific words. You use the word scary, and for a lot of people, or for some people, they're going to say, why did you use the word scary? Like, I don't understand why you're afraid to be in places that don't have people that look like you. Kelly, could you kind of explain to people why that's so scary?
So I kind of make the analogy of when a white person ends up in a Black neighborhood and they are outnumbered, so to speak, and feel uncomfortable. And it's the first time they realize that they're the outsider. Whereas when I am in spaces, I'm usually one of my type or my kind. Sounds like a chocolate bar, you know, when I say that. But it's I don't feel safe. And I can even tell you when I leave the province, because here I'm in Montreal, we speak French and English freely. And then especially my neighborhood is fantastic. It's extremely multicultural. We have a lot of first generation immigrants. We have refugees. We have a very strong Muslim population, which again also brings me comfort. I like the food. I like the people. I think because I've been exposed to, you know, these people, then I'm feeling a sense of comfort rather than fear. I actually did the Harvard University bias test. I don't know if you've seen those, if you've done those. They're fantastic. I can share the link with you after. It's Harvard University has a series of unconscious bias tests on different subjects. And when I took mine, I was surprised to see that my unconscious bias is to be surrounded by white people, by only white people. If you give me a choice, and I say that as surprised because again, half my family is white and French Canadian, and my mother is white. So why would I have this? But I haven't felt safe in all white spaces. And so I would much rather be stuck in an elevator with a group of Black men that I don't know, who may or may not, maybe, you know, you all sorts of stereotypes. Maybe they're in a gang, maybe they're not. But I would much rather be stuck in an elevator with a group of Black men than to be stuck in an elevator with one white man. Because that to me is scary. And I would get off the elevator perhaps, or not get on if I just see that. Or maybe if I go in one floor, okay. Not to say that I live my life in fear, but I don't feel safe. The same thing at night. If I'm walking down the street and if I'm, you know, there could be like 2 or 3 Black youths walking down the street, I'm like, okay, great. I can make eye contact. I can even say hello, and I will keep going, and I'm going to go on my way, and I'm not going to be worried. Whereas if I see one white man coming towards me, I might cross the street. The same way that, like, a lot of times women will say, oh, I'll clutch my purse and I'll cross the street if I see a Black man. For me, it's the complete opposite.
And I love that you're letting us know all of these fears and that you are aware of these fears. There are a lot of people who go into all white spaces or all white organizations are not aware that they are afraid, or not aware that they feel unsafe. And so they kind of trudge through and don't really acknowledge the fear or the like unsafe feeling that they have inside of their body. When you took those lessons, or I mean, you took those tests and assessments, was there a time before that you realized, or have you ever been in a space that was an all white space and you're like, I don't want to be here anymore, I need to leave?
I notice it all the time. And I think people who are not members of the global majority do not realize that we are looking at this all the time. Anytime I walk anywhere, I'm going in, I could go to a movie theater, I can go to I can get on a bus. I can go to the grocery store. I'm looking around. And, you know, you're not necessarily counting how many there are, but I'm looking for almost like just confirmation. Okay, like, is there at least a Chinese or a Korean or something, like something proximity or something that, because yeah, it's not necessarily at that point when I'm in a public space, it's not necessarily a fear. I wouldn't call it necessarily a fear. It's a concern. And it's more like, I want to know who has my back. If I fall down and faint now and I have some sort of medical emergency, who's going to come help me? Because I can't guarantee that it's going to be a white person. Because I haven't had enough good experiences to outweigh the bad. So I would go up near to some old, like I'd find like an old granny, a Chinese lady, even if I don't speak the language properly, and I'd rather faint in her arms than to, and think that she would do something rather than a white man. And I have that concern going to the hospitals as well, especially if I'm incapacitated or something, and especially here with the politics that we have. We don't have a good precedence of treating people of color, and especially our Indigenous people, well.
And I think about all the scenarios that you're talking about and how they surround around health and mental health, and how that's just like a strain on your body that you constantly have to walk into spaces with. I've been in a lot of conversations surrounding health and mental health, and never has this conversation come up or these types of conversations come up. Have you ever, you are about neurodiversity. You are about your identities. When you go into spaces to talk about that, are there other people having this type of conversation in the mental health space or the health space?
So there's a lot of confounding factors. Part of it is our access to diagnosis in the first place. People of color, Indigenous people, Black people have a harder time getting diagnosis. So our mental health is often kind of swept under the rug. Or the big issue here is that when well-being calls are made, police shoot people who are having mental health crises. Automatically go into this. You call and you say this person's having an issue. Can you come help? And they shoot them to death. So this is a big issue. And I even saying that it's that's not enough like magnifying behind it, kind of to say the weight of that, right? So it's hard to have the conversation about making sure we have good mental health when a great part of the population has no access to diagnosis or to services. And we're in Canada. Canada does not cover psychological health. So unless you have a referral from a hospital and you're being able to get some sort of inpatient or maybe even outpatient treatment, it's very difficult to have, let's say, psychology that's covered. So if you don't have some sort of private insurance, and even then, private insurance usually covers up to $500 a year. And we know that a private psychologist is going to be upwards of $125, $150. I've seen some that are $200 an hour. So you get what, 3 sessions? Is that supposed to help you? Right? So yeah, there's a lot of issues, and there's again a lot of stigma within our own community sometimes about not going for help, right? I mean, that's how I was raised, for sure. Both my father said he didn't believe in counseling or therapy. And my mother, when I was younger, did not want me to go for therapy because she was scared that, or at least that's what she claimed. She claimed that if I divulged anything, that I would be taken away. And that was the threat that I lived under. That if you go and you say you have depression problems or anxiety or whatever, that they're going to take you away. So you're forbidden from talking to doctors. You're forbidden from talking to a social worker. Don't dare say anything.
Oh, there's just so much work to be done in like all of those spaces. And it's so sad that when I was thinking, I was like, okay, we're at level 1. No, we're at level 3. No, we're at -3. Like, there's not even like a consensus across the board at like where we can even start. But all I really know is this work has to get started somewhere. You used the word radical earlier to describe how your school like made a way for people to come together, made a way for different types of people to go to school together. How are or have you seen organizations becoming more radical?
Not enough for me. I think when I work with organizations, and it's nothing to say bad about the organizations I work with, but change is very slow, and there's certain levels of comfort that they're able to deal with, and when I keep adding on the layers, it becomes too much sometimes. I can say the trends that, the trends statistically, or the government trends we see so far, is that we're getting much closer to gender parity. We're getting more comfortable with women in leadership positions and gay men. And now we've kind of plateaued. Mm-hmm. We're like, okay, we've got some women, we've got gay men. Now you got to leave us alone, right? We can't, that's it. That's enough. And that took us 10 years, right? Or whatever. So when you bring up elements of race, when you bring up elements of disability, when you bring up anything else, it's like, I think that a lot of political things and just things that have happened in our society have been partial wake-up calls, and then there was a bit of emphasis put on race for a little bit, and not even all races, but, it was Black. And then there was Asian hate crimes, but then we've forgotten about that now. You don't hear anybody talking about that now. It's completely disappeared. And it's on to the next whatever, until the next crisis comes up again, and then maybe we'll talk about it for like a little bit. Or some particular day will come up and we'll talk about it a little bit. And you see people now monopolizing or capitalizing on Juneteenth, and it's... Right? So you just see these things for a little bit, but they're not actively making change. There's still this very knee-jerk reaction, this very defensive reaction. And you get that. I've gone to businesses and it's like, well, we're working on this right now, so we can't really work on anything else. And it's like, well, so none of your women are disabled, or none of your women are part of the LGBTQ community? Like, great that you've got parity. So what about those ones? Are we doing anything about those ones? Are none of your women Black? Like, what have you done? So yeah, I mean, I laugh, but it's not really funny. It's just, I think to me, it's just a demonstration of how far we have to go.
Mm-hmm. And I think about your description. Thank you so much for these amazing descriptions, because you said people need to be more radical, but they love comfort. They want to stay in comfort. First of all, radical and comfort don't go together. Like that wouldn't be, that's not a good sandwich. Like, it can't go in the same sentence. So if you would like to be radical, you can't be comfortable. And I love that you talked about the consistent conversations needed to be had around these topics, because if you don't stay consistent, then we'll just forget. Let's wait for the next crisis. Let's wait for the next fire, and then we'll call Kelly. Just putting out fires instead of just like, hey, how did this fire start? Can we like prevent fires from starting?
Yeah, except that Kelly's not going to show up and save you. Sorry, because that's not the type of clients I want to work with. Right? This is not, sorry.
Yeah, and I love that you are not a firefighter. Like, has anyone ever expected you to be a firefighter? Has a client ever asked for your services? Like, oh, we already have fires. Could you come put?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I won't name names, but one was actually a government organization. So it was kind of surprising. But they had a mandate. They had complaints before, and that was the reason that they were finally contacting me. But they needed to check a box. They needed to, the audit that they had, or the whatever they went through to kind of keep their funding, their government funding, they needed to show that they were working towards equity. And so they tried to get me to come in and do some sort of workshop. And I was just like, no. I don't, no, it's not worth my time or my energy. I'm not going to do this so you can check a box. You'll have to find someone else. And that's what I said. I emailed them and I said, this is not aligning with what I do. So you can please find someone else. Enjoy. Good luck.
And even in those scenarios, like, I wouldn't even be able to refer you to people I know because they'll probably say no.
No, I wouldn't. No, that's it. Do you have anybody we can recommend? No, not the way that I work. No, sorry. Not to my standards. So no.
Best of luck. But these consistent conversations keep you aligned in what you're doing and keep you aligned in like the clients that you want to be in. You were having amazingly consistent conversations on your podcast. Could you talk a little bit about why you started those consistent conversations over there?
Yeah, so I would, the idea wasn't mine. The idea was Doug's, but Doug is a great pal of mine, and we met on one of his other podcasts. And so he approached me and said, the autism world is way too white and male. Let's do something about it. I want to hear from other people. And Doug is an amazing co-conspirator, right? He's a white male who has said, look, there's too much of me and my face. I'm tired of talking. I need someone else. And so he approached me and asked if I would like to do it. And I was like, I'll give it a try. So we have, very devotedly gone out, seeking out, which all the great spectrum of people on the spectrum, right? And so we're trying to make sure that people are telling their own stories, their own experiences. And I feel that, we need to be seen, right? Representation matters. And so all sorts of people are coming out of the woodwork. And I not that they weren't there, but they're being noticed because we're actively looking for them, right? And other people are then hearing themselves or seeing themselves in this and wanting to come on the show. What I have noticed, though, that's a little bit of a problem is I think because we had such big names, like big, well-known advocates in the autism community of the first season, that has made people a bit intimidated to share their stories. Because I think they're like, well, how can I be on the level with, people like Morienke and Lydia Brown and things like that, and I'm kind of like, no, your story is important. It's not. I mean, yes, it's great we have other big advocates, like well-known advocates, but at the same time, we need your story, like, because whatever you're doing in your community, in your part of the world, is important. It needs to be shared. It needs to be heard, because you're not the only one. And to me, it's about that breaking isolation, right? When I got diagnosed, and I got diagnosed way too late in my life, which is a little bit of a sticky point for me, in the sense that, I should have been noticed a lot earlier. I didn't immediately see people that looked like me. And that was part of the problem with getting a diagnosis, because it wasn't until I finally read a book written by a woman, an autistic woman, that I was able to get my head out about what the stereotype of autism is supposed to look like. And so it would have been great if I had access to things like that before, because before that, my idea of what autism was, from movies, but always these white boys and men all the time. And so I didn't align myself with that. And that's not me. I mean, I could understand some of what was going on. I did relate, but I'm like, well, that's not me. And even when I was growing up in the 80s, when we went to doctors, it wasn't even thought of, because at that time, they used to say autism only happens in boys. It wasn't even conceived of that it would be possible that it would happen to a girl. And not really happen, but just be, I guess. But yeah,
this is so important, and it aligns with all of the work that you're doing, all of the work that I'm doing. It's just, these spaces have been catered to one demographic for so long that they just believe that, oh, there's no way you could sit here. You can't sit here. How could you sit here? There's no possible way. When was the last time you had to remind someone, oh, I would like to sit here because I belong at this table, I belong sitting here?
I don't like remember exactly like an incident. I mean, in the sense that I have managed to build my life and my work in my way. I just bring my own table. It's my table. I get to make it bigger. I get to bring more chairs. It's all good. But I do notice, like I have noticed in the past, where people kind of forget aspects of my identity. I've had people say too that I forgot you were Black. So hard, but yeah. I was like, how do you forget that I'm Black? Right? Yeah, and it was interesting because this is in my 20s, and I polled my friends back in LiveJournal. Do you remember LiveJournal? Were you active on LiveJournal? It was an online journal. Anyway, and I polled my friends. I said, do you see me as more white or more Black? And some of them said, until you asked me, I didn't even see you as Black. And it was a revelation for me, though, because I'm like, oh, so it wasn't, and they're not completely to blame. I think that when I was surrounded by them, when I was surrounded by primarily white people, I would hide aspects of my culture. I didn't talk about my aspects of my Black culture. I didn't talk about the food that I ate. I didn't like, everything I did was very white, I guess, right? In that sense. And it took me some time, I guess, to kind of, and I think people felt almost like I was forcing it down their throat, because I wanted to be seen for both of my identities. What happens here again in Montreal, in the Anglophone community, people forget that I'm half Quebecoise, right? And so I'll be in a room with people and they'll start making fun of French people. And I'm just like, okay, this is interesting, right? Because they forget that I'm half Quebecoise. And then it might be something like, oh, well, not you. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. Okay, but how about my mom? How about my aunt? How about my cousins? How about my uncle? Let's talk, right? So it's interesting. Like I've seen from both sides, in the sense where people will they become comfortable with one part of my identity and they forget other parts of the identity.
And I love that you are not allowing people to forget anymore. Like that, and that's the growth that a lot of us have had to come to terms with is, I let y'all forget. Like the summer of 2020, a lot of Black people decided, oh no, never. Like I will be myself in all spaces. I will let y'all know exactly what I expect from y'all. And I do believe that all Black lives matter. Like I don't understand why y'all didn't know that before, but I am making it known now. So thank you so much for breaking down your experiences with us, because there probably are still people out there who let people forget. And it's important for us not to let them forget. For the people who are listening to this, who are going to go into their offices tomorrow, break down doors and say, hey, let me remind y'all of some shit. What would be the top 3 tips you would share with them about those conversations?
I would say, you don't know who you're talking to. And you brought up a good point there about not letting people forget. My mother, to her credit, my mother was white, French Canadian. To her credit, she did not let people forget that she was married to a Black man and she had Black children. And it was the same kind of situations would happen to her. People come in and start talking about Black people or making comments and saying the N-word and all sorts of things. And she's like, excuse me? My husband's Black. My girls are Black. And never again, right? And so she's also an amazing co-conspirator, right? So yeah, you don't know. Same way, I can mask my autism too. I don't have to be flamboyantly autistic all the time. And so people can forget that too. I've had that happen in workspaces. People have forgotten that I'm hard of hearing. All sorts of things, because whatever they don't see immediately in front of them, they forget. One of my sons is Inuk. And you're like, how did that happen? He's adopted. People always get so confused when you say, well, how did that happen? And they'll go, oh, well, do your kids have the same father? And I said, well, no, but they don't have the same mother either. So let's think about that. So I don't know that I have 3 tips for people, but a lot of it is, don't assume face value of everything that's going on in somebody's life or any identities that they have. You don't know when you're addressing a room if you're talking to somebody who's trans. You don't know if you're talking to somebody with whatever background, because you can't always tell from looking at them. So just watch your mouth, like, But I don't know if I have 3 tips. I say that's probably the big one. Don't walk around assuming that you know everything about someone's background. And again, that doesn't mean you have to be on edge. It doesn't mean that you have to censor yourself. It means don't make inappropriate remarks about things like mental health or transgender people or any race, anything. Just don't. Like, I don't understand why that's so difficult, but like, just don't do it. It's not funny, so don't do it. And find something else to laugh about. Again, you just never know who's in the room.
We have talked about these rooms consistently in this conversation. And if y'all are unaware of what is inappropriate to say about the groups that Kelly has talked about today, maybe your rooms don't have enough people in them, don't have different types of people in them, because apparently I can go on a tangent on that, but you need different people in your rooms for that reason. So you are aware what's inappropriate, and so that people feel safe enough to come to you and tell you, hey, that's inappropriate. Thank you so much for everything that you have shared today. Like, amazing. Somebody is going to hear that and apply it to their journey. So I'm really thankful. Are there any last minute sprinkles that you'd like to share with the audience?
My sprinkles, I guess. I think, watch me on LinkedIn. I'm in the middle of a business validation program. I am changing the course of what my business is doing. And so I would love to reveal what that is. I don't know what that is right now, but it is changing. Things are moving along. So keep track of what I'm doing on LinkedIn. I have been quiet just because I am so immersed in that program right now that I can't do a million things at once, but I am trying to, as they recommended for me, the facilitators recommended that I lean in to my strengths. And so things are going to be moving around in a bit of a different way. Not stopping what I'm doing. I will always be advocating, but it's just going to have a different flavor or a different way of me showing up. I also let you know, of course, I'd love to share, we talked about the podcast, the Intersections on the Spectrum podcast. If people are inspired, or just even you just want to hear some stories of some people that you've never heard of. I mean, we've interviewed people from all over the world, literally. Like, we've gone almost every continent, except for Australia. But we've done, like, we have Singapore, we've got Malaysia, we've done Africa, we've got the UK, and everywhere. So there's people from everywhere. You know, autism has no boundaries, and it's been amazing to see what people are doing in their parts of the world. And I guess finally, I have my books that are, now my screen just froze. But I have How to Parent Like an Autistic. It's in English and in Brazilian Portuguese. It's on ebook and in audio and print. So that is the first of a series. I am going to be doing more of a how to blank like an autistic. So also watch the space for that, because that's hopefully going to come out in the next year. I hope.
That is so awesome. And of course, everyone, their links are going to be all in the show notes, so you can look in the show notes for links. But thank you so much, Kelly, for being such an amazing guest today. To anyone who is listening to this, I love the last minute sprinkle, because if you're an entrepreneur listening to this, pivot if you fucking want to. Lean into your strengths, like, do whatever you want. Say no to clients that are just using you for clout. This has been an amazing episode in so many ways, so thank you so much. To anyone who is listening, please keep setting those boundaries and saying absolutely not to anything unaligned. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.